Viewed every Saturday starting at 11 a.m. and streaming live on Nationwide's YouTube channel. Let's Talk Pep on Nationwide 90 FM.
I'll be where I wanna be. I know I can. I know I can.
Every father should remember that one day his son will follow his example and not his advice. A quote from Charles F. Kettering, which brings us into this episode of the Jamaican Dads podcast. I'm Garth Williams, and very soon I'll be joined by Dennis Brooks, Marlon Campbell, and Floyd Green. And we have in studio with us economist Dr. Damian King. He's the executive director of Capri. And also online, we've got Dr. Leanne Levers, pardon me. She is the director of advocacy at Capri. And this evening, we're going to be discussing a report and research which was done by Capri and released today to the public. Dr. King, good evening. Welcome. We are happy to have you here with us as we do embark on this journey this evening to discuss your research. The social costs of unsafe, remind me again, of
social cost of unsafe abortions.
That's right. Social cost of unsafe abortions. Dr. Levers, good evening.
Good evening. Hi, how are you?
We're fine, thanks. We're happy to have you. Dr. King, happy to have you as well. Usually we
Very happy to be here.
Awesome. We usually have what we call the opening salvo, where we kind of discuss an issue separate from the topic. But because of the nature of the research, and we know that the discussion is probably going to go on for a little while, we want to ensure that we have enough time to share a bit about the research, the findings, the recommendations, and so on. So we have opted to not go the route of an opening salvo this evening. But let me get right into it, because the social cost of unsafe abortions. It's a very, abortions, of course, a very sensitive topic here in Jamaica. Why this research? Why now?
Well, let me first answer why now, because we have become increasingly aware of the problem that we've investigated, which is that the issue of abortion is not only about the moral dimension, which is important. It's not only about the religious dimension, which is important. And it is not only about the right to autonomy of women over their bodies, which is also important, but it has a consequence for all of the rest of us, for the entire society. It has public health costs, it has social costs, it has economic consequences. And that is what we chose to bring to the discussion, because we think that looking at that aspect of it brings new information that was not part of the debate before, and brings information that we think is persuasive.
Now, what would have gone into creating this research? You got funding from the EU, but just share with us a little bit more of the background about Capri and going in this particular direction.
Capri is a public policy think tank, which means that our day job is to identify what are the pressing economic and social issues that government is going to be making policy about or ought to be making policy about. We recognize that those who make those policy decisions, the ministers and the permanent secretaries and the cabinet, don't have the advantage of having a lot of research capacity within the public administration. And because they don't have the research capacity, they often are faced with the unfortunate situation, despite the best of intentions, of having to make important policy decisions without all of the relevant knowledge that can be brought to bear on those policy decisions. Capri exists to solve that problem, that we independently get funding, a lot of it from good corporate citizens in Jamaican private sector, in this case, with the generous support of the European Union, so we can create the capacity to really delve into the issue, uncover all of the relevant information, and then make it available to those who have to make this decision and those who have to make whatever is the policy decision. So that's what we do. We provide information and knowledge relevant to policy decisions, and then we hand it to the government and to all the stakeholders, right, so that they are properly informed.
Which then begs the question, what's the next step now that you've gone public, you've done the research, you've shared it with the public, you did so today, it's available for consumption via your website, you can download it there. What's the next step?
Well, there are 3 steps to the process. The first one is the research, which we have now done. The second one is now underway. It's not enough, obviously, to just do the research and plops it on the desk. We need to make sure that everybody who has an interest in this and everybody who has the potential to influence a decision gets the information. And that has to do not just with writing up the results, but packaging the results in an understandable way and disseminating it through discussions like this, through the presentation that we made online this morning in the web forum, through various other fora that engages the public around the issue. So that's underway now. And the third step is to make ourselves available and actually to push for one-on-one meetings with all the important influencers, including the ministers and the policymakers, so that they can interrogate what we have done and come to a full understanding of all the relevant issues.
Is there a timeline on these two phases? The packaging the information to place with the relevant authorities and other stakeholders, and the third step, as you mentioned?
Well, the communications phase is now underway, and we are going to go straight into the advocacy, which is that final stage. Mm-hmm. And indeed, the Dr. Levers, who joins me in this discussion, is our director of advocacy. So she's principally responsible for that. Which
then just leads me to bring her in as well. Marlon Campbell is on. Good evening, Marlon. Thanks a lot for as always, joining us. Dennis is now in studio as well. So
hey, is he in uniform?
No, he's not in uniform this evening.
Good.
I mean, it's a kind of uniform.
of sorts. All right, but Dr. Levers, the advocacy, as Damien mentioned just now. May I call you Leanne for the purpose of this interview?
Sure.
All right, great, Leanne. Yeah, but just share with us a little bit now on the timeline that we're looking at. We're in the communications phase. Advocacy is the next step. What are we looking at here now in terms of a timeline?
Sure. Well, as Dr. King mentioned, there are a number of steps which involve making sure that all the relevant stakeholders are informed and aware of the research so that they can make informed decisions accordingly. So our next step actually is that we have a few social media events coming up, which will again seek to inform the wider public about the various bits of research that are available, not only that of Capri's, but other relevant research that needs to be considered, and to meet with the various stakeholders to provide them with information, again, in order to make those decisions. This will be taking place literally, as Damien said, we already are in the process of doing that by coming on platforms such as yours. We did a nationwide interview earlier today. We have more interviews coming up on Monday, as well as meetings that we will be coordinating in order to do that over the next few months.
Will those meetings include, for example, virtual town halls, etc., meeting people where they are? The radio may capture a particular audience, nationwide in particular may capture an even more specific and targeted audience. Are you looking to broaden the spectrum?
Certainly. I think we attempt to curate our messages accordingly to our various audiences. So yes, men are a part of this discussion, and we seek to garner their attention through platforms as this, but we definitely will be having virtual town hall meetings in order to get a wider perspective from the wider community about their opinions. We'll also be engaging the medical community as well as politicians and lawmakers accordingly in various ways. So each audience will be approached in a different way in order to make sure that the message is delivered in the most digestible form.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You're listening to the Jamaican Dads podcast. We're discussing the social costs of unequal access to safe abortions. We've got Dr. Damien King and Dr. Leanne Levers, online. We're going to take a quick break and return with more of this on the. We'll just return with more. I'll be right back.
What is Frankly Speaking? It's honest, candid, and frank commentary. Don't miss out on the latest news, politics, and debatable commentary from Franklin McKnight. Join Nationwide 90 FM on Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 p.m. for Frankly Speaking with Franklin McKnight. It's uncommon commentary, the latest in current affairs, politics, significant individual Jamaican achievements, places of interest, public behavior, and manners. That's Frankly Speaking on Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 p.m. with Franklin McKnight on Nationwide 90 FM.
How certain are you that you're taking proper care of your pets? How often do you take them to the vet? Just as we need annual checkups with our doctors, most pets need regular checkups too. Owning and caring for a family pet doesn't have to be a difficult or burdensome experience. Nationwide 90 FM has a new and exciting feature called Pets World that will help you take better care of your pets. Join Nationwide 90 FM every Wednesday at 6:50 a.m. during the program This Morning as we take you into the do's and don'ts of caring for your pets. That's Pets World every Wednesday at 6:50 a.m. during the program This Morning on Nationwide 90 FM, a revolution in media.
Welcome back to the Jamaican Dads podcast. Tonight we are discussing Capri's newest research and report on the social costs of unequal access to safe abortions. We've got Dr. Leanne Levers, Director of Advocacy at Capri, and in studio, she's online. In studio, we've got Dr. Damien King, he's the Executive Director of Capri. Dennis Brooks is here with us in studio as well, and Marlon Campbell also online. Just before we went to the break, we're talking about the phases of presenting the research. Well, you've done the research, we're in the communication phase now, and the next step is that of advocacy. Is there a strategy around the delivery of this advocacy? Just kind of take us a little bit through that, and then we can start, getting into some of the findings and.
Well, a key part of the strategy is to ensure that the audience really understands the issues. So that makes it less about the research per se and a lot about the communication, to be able to identify what are the key issues that are going to lead to the decision point and making sure that those are understood. And if we can do so, then what we do is it's not just about giving the information to the policymaker. It's important to create a constituency of opinion that understands the issues, so they can have an intelligent conversation with the policymaker and make intelligent demands.
Right.
So even if the policymaker does not follow what seems to follow from the research, then the informed public can say, what is going on here? Why haven't you done this?
Right.
So it really is creating this whole body of understanding around the issue. That is the strategy. And that is why Capri has actually been so successful in getting policies implemented.
Yeah, Leanne, as we talk about having an informed and intelligent conversation, what do you find? What have you found is driving the conversation now as it relates to the matter of safe and legal abortions in Jamaica? What are what are the angles that people are coming from, and are they misinformed in their conversations, do you think?
No, I don't think it's a matter of misinformation. As Damien mentioned, there has been a religious element to the discussion. There has been a moral element to the discussion. There's been a human rights element to the discussion in terms of women's autonomy and the right to make decisions about their body. And I think what Capri's research is injecting or inserting into the conversation to make a more comprehensive, or to provide a more comprehensive understanding of all of the relevant factors to be considered, is the reality of the situation, which is that women are having abortions in spite of its illegality, and that actually this comes at great cost to not only women and children, but also the society as a whole.
Dr. Levers, I'm so happy to have you to kind of pick your brain as the lead researcher on this. For me, I know Capri has a very rich tradition in terms of the quality of the research that it puts out and adding value to the conversation. And when I saw the social costs of unequal access to abortion, it's a very specific laser focus. And I'm thinking, what's the methodology that they'll use to go after probing the social costs? And I think that's where I'd really want to get some understanding of how did you guys go after the social costs?
Well, just to clarify, I am not the lead researcher
Ah.
for this piece of research. We have a great researcher by the name of Sarah Maria from Finland who took on this as a quantitative researcher. Certainly, one of the things that we immediately do is try to source local statistics where possible. Obviously, we are aware that there is a huge issue with underreporting as it relates to illegal abortions because of the fact that they are illegal, and many women would not be willing to come forward to report or to indicate or go through the traditional professional medical channels to have an abortion,
Right.
which automatically affects the statistics that you're able to pull. But also Sarah Maria, and I'm sure Damien can speak to this in greater detail, would have made comparisons across jurisdictions and extrapolated information accordingly in order to come up with statistics based on other statistics that have been garnered through research elsewhere from IMF, World Health Organization, World Bank, and so on.
And so in going about it and deciding what variables you're going to look at, you know, I'm taking us through. So it was a quantitative research, and how then would you establish these things are the reliable indicators that we're going to use then?
Well, we've gotten data from a number of different sources. As Leon was indicating, you know, there is not one set of reliable data on abortions, precisely because so much of it is done at the back door because it is illegal.
Yes.
But this is one of the most robustly evidenced bits of research that Capri has ever done. I mean, when you look at the report, you can see that every single statistic is backed by a citation. What we had to do is we had to pull together from different sources.
Yes.
So the information we get from the hospitals, information we get from surveys, information we get from other countries that are comparable to Jamaica, countries where it is legal and where it's illegal, and we can make some comparisons. And going through that exercise in a systematic way, we've actually been able to garner a great deal of evidence on what is under that umbrella of social cost.
Right.
Is what is the cost to the women who have had unsafe abortions? What is the ongoing lifetime cost to them? What is the cost to the children who, because their abortions are being performed illegally, or the attempted abortions, many of them end up being born anyway? What are the consequences for them?
Wow.
So we get a social cost. What are the costs to the public health system? Because so many abortions are botched and therefore become a public cost. What are the costs to Jamaica's problem with crime? Because that also is one of the consequences. What are the costs to the perpetuation of poverty? So we have pulled all of these different social costs together. And what we have said is, here's a dimension of the issue that has not been part of the debate. Everybody is familiar with the moral dimension. Everybody's familiar with the religious dimension. Everybody's familiar with the what you may call, not quite accurately, the feminist dimension. Here is a new dimension that is highly relevant because the cost is extremely high. That's what we've brought.
Dr. King, Dr. Livers, we're really not talking about this. This is the dimension that has been hiding in the dark, so to speak.
Ignored.
Along with their abortions.
Because of the passion which people bring to the conversation, and they are right to come to the conversation with their passions. But I really think that all right, let's take the break. When we come back, I really want to look at what we have learned about these different dimensions and how we can maybe create a matrix of understanding of the cost.
You asked, we listened, and now we have the answer. Shop NNN is finally here. Shirts, mugs, cups, bags, and so much more. Follow Shop NNN on Instagram and _shop.nnn and click on the website link in the bio. NNN branded merchandise is our way of ensuring you feel like a welcomed member of the extended NNN family. Shop now. Shop NNN merchandise galore.
Lord of mercy. This one is very classic, dedicated to all schoolers who are taking them.
If you've ever struggled to pass an exam, then you'll know that students today are under great pressure to get good grades and secure qualification needed to move on to higher education. The problem is that too many students are struggling alone and could really benefit from connecting with hardworking teachers and other bright students in other parts of the country and the region. Join me, Dennis Brooks, this and every Friday evening from 8 to 9, with a repeat on Saturday morning from 8 to 9. For the A-Team, a study group on radio. My team of teachers, students, and experts will break down the syllabus, giving you information, tips, and past paper questions that will help you get top grades in your upcoming exams. Follow us on Facebook Live and on Twitter and be a part of the community. It's the A-Team. Fridays at 8 p.m. with a repeat at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning. It's your free extra class on radio and social media. And it's right here on Nationwide 90 FM, the revolution in media.
The A-Team is brought to you by eLearning Jamaica. E-access to learning for all.
Welcome back to the Jamaican Dads podcast. Garth Williams, Dennis Brooks in studio, along with our guests in studio, Dr. Damien King. Online, we've got Dr. Leon Levers and Marlon Campbell as well. We're discussing Capri's newest research published today of the social cost of unequal access to safe abortions. We've done a bit of the background. We know what phases are being applied to this research. The research has been done. We're in the communications phase now, and the next phase includes advocacy. Now we've got into a bit about the methodology. And Dr. King, before we get into the results, you were adding some dimensions to which we need to add those to the conversation around safe abortions in Jamaica. But just share a little bit before we get down into those findings.
Well, the way to understand the data is to recognize that when you are designing policy, you're not designing policy in relation to a fantasy that you would like to exist in the real world. You're designing policy in relation to the status quo. And that is the approach that Capri has taken. Abortions are taking place.
Right. That's a reality.
So there's no by the thousands. So none of the options that we currently face is not having abortions. And illegality has not achieved that.
Right.
So the question we face is, what are the consequences of abortions being illegal? And we have found that the consequence of that is botched, unsafe, dangerous abortions that come at a high social cost for poor women. The women who are well off can afford to go to a properly certified doctor, still acting illegally, but they can have safe abortions. The poor women cannot afford to pay enough to get a proper abortion, so they go to somebody who has no medical training and they try something that may or may not work. So we are comparing what we are proposing to that status quo.
Right.
Abortions are taking place. Should they take place safely and properly, or should they continue to take place illegally with high social costs?
Right. Now,
if I could interject, God. Good night, Damon. Good night, Leon. Sorry, Marlon Campbell here. I saw, and I remember to screenshot this, a doctor would have made a small rant after that newspaper heading about abortion rebellion. She had written, her words is, "Sir, this man suggests illegal abortion numbers are inflated. Sir, what you know about this? What you know about when the botch ones turn up at Jubilee on death's door? What you know about just not the numbers, but the complication rates? What do you know about the sepsis, the shock from blood loss, the retained products, the uterine perforations, the emergency surgeries that follow? What do you know?" Every time this comes up and these people want to drop their 2 cents, I get so angry, because the night all you want, it is happening, and all this doctor wants is for it to happen safely. That just to support your statement, Dr. King.
And
that was from a doctor.
And those are just the medical consequences alone.
Right.
What Leanne can tell you about are the other social costs.
Yeah, and let's get into that, Leanne. Share with us some of the major findings, particularly. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, I
jump in
want to
a
hear
bit.
if we were to write like a headline and say major finding of this research, would be the standout findings of this research in relation to various categories?
I think as it relates to healthcare, I think one of the things that we find is that, as Damien pointed out, women are accessing illegal abortions. And as a result, there are many health consequences to be had. I believe Marlon just pointed to the fact that mortality and morbidity are huge issues or huge consequences of unsafe abortion. So the research indicates that many women, I think it's approximately 13% of those admitted to the local hospitals here, who have attempted abortions often have serious complications such as bleeding, such as uterine rupture. Our mortality rates as a result of abortion-related deaths are quite high. So they're 16 times higher than they are in the EU and 6 times higher than they are in the United States.
Could you repeat that
Say
for
that
us,
again?
please?
Wow.
So the mortality rate as a result of illegal abortions in Jamaica is 16 times higher than the EU and 6 times higher than the United States. And I believe the percentage that's locally here is 85%. So 85% of maternal deaths are related to unsafe abortions.
85% of maternal deaths in Jamaica are related to unsafe abortions.
Additionally, the costs that are incurred to the public healthcare system, because essentially what happens is, as Damon pointed out, poorer women are accessing these illegal abortions. And as a result, they're more likely to become dependent on the healthcare system. And these complications, which have to be treated by the public healthcare system, in addition to the complications who are born in spite of unsafe terminations, I think is approximately 1.4 million Jamaican dollars. And that obviously is an estimate based on what we are aware of in terms of women who are actually accessing the public healthcare system, knowing that there are many who do not.
I'm still stuck at the first finding.
Yeah. No, hold on.
Because it
$1.4 million.
Go ahead.
$1.4 million per person.
No, $1.4 million. I believe that would be an annual cost. That is
US dollars.
US dollars, man.
US dollars.
Oh, sorry. Ooh.
I mean, I feel like I'm being I'm receiving information that I could not have possibly thought it happened.
Yeah,
precisely.
Because I was thinking, okay, this is a serious problem, but not to
Of
the
this
magnitude.
Yeah.
And I always say you cannot fix a problem that you do not understand the dimensions of, which is why this research is so important in filling empirical gaps. Are there any other findings that you think are important for us to appreciate?
Well, I think another interesting part of the research is that what we found is that these issues and these costs are not related to one specific generation of women and children or one specific administration. This is a cyclical issue that has a spin-off effect whereby when women are having unwanted children, their children are also more likely to have unwanted children because they're being raised by a generation of ill-equipped and unsupported mothers, whether that's lack of financial support, lack of family support. And ultimately, these children become dependent on public assistance themselves. I think there was a study that's quoted in the research that says that girls who grow up in poverty in a single-parent household, likely to be unwanted as well, are twice as likely to have a teen birth. And their children are ultimately more at a higher risk, of poor health outcomes, increased participation in crime, which obviously has its own costs as well, loss of human capital, and so on. So I think it's really important to note that it's not just a one-off situation that's taking place, but actually what we're doing by forcing women to have unsafe, illegal abortions is creating a legacy of poorer outcomes for our society.
And of course, the thing that jumps out at you there is the connection to crime.
Mm-hmm.
That the greater likelihood that children who are raised in that kind of environment where they weren't wanted in the first place are far more likely to get into crime.
Yeah. One of the things I probably should have asked earlier, just kind of came back to me just now, in terms of the research. With whom did you speak? Where's the data coming from? Because I'm pretty sure it's a pretty broad source, but
I mean, well, it wasn't from primary data; it was mainly secondary data. Um,
Damien, do you want to speak to that, or should I?
No, you go ahead.
Well, I think, yes, there is local data that is available. Some of that data is estimated, some of that data is very specific and has been pulled directly from our local stats here. So the public healthcare system, the data that's available there. Some of the economic costs have been extrapolated from available data, which may have been older or which may have been limited to a particular community, and then also compared across jurisdictions. So, for instance, the crime reduction research that we're just referring to earlier is research that we've been able to look at locally, but also been able to recognize that it is consistent across jurisdictions, regardless of the various demographics, etc. So the research that we've looked at according to crime reduction was also consistent with research in other jurisdictions, such as Canada and Europe and so on. So there's a means of contrast, and there's also looking at local data that is readily available to us.
And so, for example, the maternal mortality rate, which you quoted earlier, as being 85% of maternal deaths are related to unsafe abortions, would have come from data provided like by the Ministry of Health, for example?
It would have been numbers that would have been looked at over a number of years. So not just a specific year or specific period, but over a number of years, and then a percentage based on those numbers.
And coming from the health professionals who are facing that consequence, like the one that Marlon quoted.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Then.
Yeah. So when we look at, for instance, the cyclical dimension, and we look at that intergenerational impact, you know, I want us to see if we can begin, before we run out of time, to unpack some of the implications then. So given these findings, what is the analysis telling us, and what does it mean, and what does it tell us that we need to be doing? So can we look at some of these critical findings and as a catalyst pad, to a way forward then? So let's take this, for instance, the point that you were making about it being a cyclical, almost intergenerational cost.
Which means that the cost that Leanne is referring to, you need to multiply that by every subsequent generation, because the problem is reproducing itself.
Yes. So, for instance, we see, as I mentioned to you, that obviously children of teen mothers are more vulnerable, they're more likely to be incarcerated, and they're more likely to end up in state care. And actually, the state care point is a really good way of demonstrating the spin-off effect. So currently, there are over 4,800 children in state care under the CPFSA as wardens of the CPFSA. Many of those children come from spaces where they are deemed uncontrollable. And what that really means is that they're being raised by mothers who are ill-equipped and can't manage the responsibility of parenting. And reports indicate that 76% of children in care have exhibited maladjusted behaviors, including social withdrawal, including aggression, as well as suicidal tendencies. And 71% of children in care have been identified as having learning disabilities as well. And the cost to the Jamaican taxpayer as a result of maintaining the number of children that are in care is approximately 1.6 billion Jamaican dollars. So you can see that this spin-off effect is directly per annum, is directly having an effect on the society, in terms of, you see the knock-on effect on the children of the current cohort of children that we see, but also that will definitely take place for the following one as well.
Yeah. I've got a couple of other questions, but we're right up on the break. So let's do that. You're listening to the Jamaican Dads podcast. We'll be back with more right after these.
Empress is a creative and social entrepreneur, media executive, youth advocate, mother, wife, friend, sister, daughter, television and radio host, And she is ready to bring something for every woman on Nationwide 90 FM. She is soulful, passionate, bold, and she is every woman. Join Empress Golding for lunch, weekdays at 1 to 3 p.m. If you are a woman and you have a story to tell, to inspire, educate, or make lives better for every woman, then email your story. Email talk to emprezz@gmail.com. Tune in to our program live from our YouTube channel, Nationwide 90 FM. And remember to like, subscribe, and share our content. And we're also on WhatsApp at 876-285-5693.
Hi, I'm Lori Gale, inviting you to join me weekdays at 12:55 p.m. on Nationwide 90 FM for
Oasis. Stop by for a refreshing drink and share a God perspective for the day.
Experience the change when you love the Word, learn the Word, live the Word.
Oasis, weekdays at 12:55 p.m.
on Nationwide 90 FM.
The rebroadcast of the Oasis can be heard weekdays at 5:45 a.m.
Welcome back to the Jamaican Dads podcast. We're in the final quarter for this program tonight. And now we realize that one show really is not enough to unpack and really get into the meat of the matter. Which, interestingly, Dr. King is the name of our discussion program. That's what we call the segment. The segment, the meat of the matter. The social costs of unequal access to safe abortions. Research done by Capri, released to the public today. We have in studio Dr. Damien King. He's the executive director of Capri. And online, we have Dr. Leanne Levers. She's the director of advocacy. Also online, Marlon Campbell, one of the Jamaican dads. In studio with me, Garth Williams, is Dennis Brooks. We started to, Dennis, to
look at the some of the key findings and look at, what those what kind of recommendations those findings produce. And I'm just looking at a couple of cases this week. A case of a woman, 27 years old, who is now charged with concealment of birth and infanticide because she just had the child and just disposed of it, literally. And there's a case out of Westmoreland, a horrible case of child abuse. It really was a kick to my gut this afternoon when I saw the images. It was really rough as a day for me, as a week. And, maybe these things get pushed to the side when you're talking about murder, but there are some really serious social costs that I've seen just this week. And so this conversation really means more to me. And this research really means more to me. But then how do we, from a policy perspective, when we are trying to craft such a policy on such sensitive areas, how do we unpack something like when we look at this whole bit about the number of women, the percentage of women who have these serious complications that, you have a public health care problem to contend with? 80-odd%. That it's
baffling. And we need to bear in mind the important dimension of inequity.
Yes.
That this is a problem for women who are not well off.
Mm-hmm.
The well-off women are having abortions safely because they can afford to pay the right price to the right doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So to go forward from here now, we need to identify, if we are going to solve this problem, what are the obstacles to poor women, which frankly is most of the women in Jamaica. What are the obstacles to safe abortions? And there are three of them. One is the illegality.
Mhm.
Two, when we take account of the teenage dimension.
But pause. What about illegality that makes it such
Well, we'll come
an
to that.
obstacle?
I just want to say what the
Okay.
three are. We
Right.
identified the three as the illegality,
Mhm.
the fact that so many of these are teenagers, and therefore it raises the issue of the parents.
Mhm.
And the third obstacle is the cost.
Okay.
So if we're going to get past the problem, we need to address all three of those.
All right. Does the illegality cause the cost? I mean, in terms of economic terms, does the illegality cause the cost to be higher? Dr. Livers?
Yes, so illegal abortions quite naturally are often carried out by untrained individuals with inappropriate equipment, or it's pushing women to carry out abortions themselves by using a variety of means ranging from medication to other kind of more heinous or severe approaches. And so I think the very illegality is what is driving women through the back door. Whereas go ahead, Damon.
No, finish.
No, I was just going to say it's driving women through the back door and preventing them from seeking safe termination. So it is quite literally the illegality that is causing many of these health complications and the direct cost to the public healthcare system.
And then there's an illegal premium that is added to the cost because it is illegal.
Right.
I mean, a woman who wants an abortion cannot therefore go to all the doctors in the community and do a shopping comparison.
Right.
It is whoever is prepared to be illegal. So that is going to add to the cost.
And so you're of the view then, or the research is pointing us in the direction of removing that barrier would significantly change things and would shift the cost issue. How quickly and how?
No.
Okay.
Removing that barrier is not going to make a significant difference. We have to remove all three barriers.
Got you.
The illegality is only one barrier. The second recommendation is to remove the second barrier, that teenage girls have to have access to safe abortions without parental consent. Because if they had parental support in the first place, most of the problem might not exist.
Right.
So if we are going to say yes, but they have to have parental consent, then we are putting in the same barrier that's going to drive them to the backdoor aborter.
Is that a legal or a policy recommendation?
Well, when we make it legal and the teenager shows up and asks for an abortion, the medical practitioner should not be obligated to seek parental consent.
But
So that's our second recommendation.
I was going to, let's not touch on the spin-off that could happen. I guess we can work out the semantics, with the whole age and all them things still. But
what I want
let's not talk. Yeah, I'll leave that alone. That's a question. We don't have enough time to really explore that. But what would be the third barrier you were saying?
Well, no, I have a question before we get to the third barrier because I'm still on the second barrier. Are we? And it's just for listeners to get an understanding. Has the research found that most of the women accessing these illegal and unsafe abortions, teenagers? What's the percentage there? What are we looking at?
I believe that there is the percentage of women who are accessing abortions that are teenagers. I don't believe that we have an accurate number for how many teenage specific women are accessing abortions. We do know that the majority of women who are accessing abortions or unsafe abortions specifically are young and poorer women. But
so if you were to create a profile, it would be young, poor, urban, or urban-rural dynamic doesn't even matter.
Urban-rural is not a distinguishing factor. So both urban and rural women are accessing abortions at a disproportionate rate relative to wealthier women and women who have higher educational attainment and so on. So you can see in studies that with the increase in educational attainment as well as wealth status of households, women are less likely to access illegal or unsafe abortions.
All right, let's get, well, we've got 6 minutes before we close.
We
so-
have to touch the cost factor,
Right.
because how do you remove the cost barrier, the economics of it and the social side of it? How do you remove the cost barrier?
Removing the cost barrier leads to our third recommendation, that abortions should be state funded, should be publicly funded. Otherwise, you leave in the cost barrier and you have the same problem. If you're going to, if we're going to address the problem in a way that is going to be impactful, we have to remove all three barriers.
Is that best practice in other jurisdictions? Have you found?
Yes. So across other jurisdictions where illegal or unsafe abortions are, or safer abortions are legal, the number of women, well, the state is usually applying no costs. It's usually publicly funded, and you can see the positive results that come out of that in terms of crime reduction. There's a direct correlation with crime reduction, greater correlation with safer and healthier outcomes for women, and so on.
Let me ask a question from the streets, please. Have you found, or has the research also found, or is there research out there that shows, for example, when legal, safe abortions are state funded, are you finding that there's an increase in the number of abortions? Are more women opting for them, or is there a more responsible approach, so to speak, to?
It's difficult to make that comparison because when abortions are illegal, we don't have a full data set in which we can have confidence. What we have done in our research is looked at the consequences. But when you make it illegal, then all abortions are reported, and then you have data that is not comparable to the one before.
You know, when I look at this, and you're looking at social costs, and what, as I'm understanding, this research is helping us to do, is look at a cost-benefit analysis side to the debate to add to the religious and the moral and the legal conversation, a cost-benefit analysis. And it's about the social cost. And so you're weighing up the cost, so to speak. Are we to assume that the benefit side of the cost-benefit analysis is obvious then by virtue of the cost? Because this is a cost analysis.
It's not.
Well,
go ahead, Leanne.
No, I was just going to say, well, there is evidence to indicate that actually there are benefits, economic and social, to providing access to safe and legal abortions based on the research that's available for countries or from countries where abortions are safe and legal.
You know, if you are a pro-lifer, which is the term that is used, you need to accept the fact that the illegality is not leading to life. The abortions are taking place. So all we're debating here is what are the circumstances under which the abortion will take place, and what are the consequences for the society as a whole of it taking place illegally and unsafely. And introducing a sharp inequity in the society that is perpetuating the cycle of poverty.
You know, I'd like to thank you for this research. I'd like to thank Capri for the work that they've done, because it gives us something else to think about, and it adds value to the conversation, which is what science is supposed to do at the end of the day. And I think that with all the sensitive positions that can be taken, it allows us as men to understand even more what women are going through. I think I'm fairly well informed, but I was blown away by some of the findings in this research. And I thank you for that.
As were many of us at Capri.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, wow, time really has gone by. We'd like to thank you, Damien, for joining us, Dr. Damien King, Executive Director at Capri. Director of Advocacy, Dr. Leanne Levers. This is not the last time we're going to have a conversation about this particular research. We're going to have to have another conversation. Marlon, thank you for joining us online. To everyone who listened on air and also via Jamaican Dads on YouTube, we thank you for joining us. Where can we find the research, Dr. King, the website?
CapriCaribbean.org. It's on the website, as are all our reports.
All right. So please, folks, please ensure that you apprise yourself of the details of this report. Get there and read it and engage others in informed, intelligent conversations around this matter. To Tashai Grant, to our good friend Bugs on the other side of the glass, who makes us sound so well. Thank you so much. Please send us your emails at JamaicanDadsPodcast@gmail.com. Please follow us online at Jamaican Dads. That's on Facebook, that's on Instagram, and on Twitter. It's the Jamaican Dads. Until next week, please take care.